class.
Welcome to the Church of Mabus radio show. It's Friday night, 7:09 p.m. Central, 8:09 p.m. Eastern. Merry St. Patrick's Day. You're listening to United Public Radio, 107.7 FM New Orleans. Let me see, 30th Annual Ozark Mountain UFO Congress, OzarkUFOCongress.com, April 14th through the 16th. That's OzarkUFOConference.com. AsianTeaIsKratom.com. Asian Tea is Kratom, and that Asian tea is used by people all over for everything from pain relief to anxiety to sleep or get energy. It's 100% organic. It's not been evaluated by the FDA and not intended to treat or cure or diagnose any disease. Life is better on Taunton Bay, and that's AsianTeaIsKratom.com. Let me see. Next week, next Friday, I had to move some schedule people around for this one because I didn't think he would answer. And sometimes people answer, and you got to give them a date really quick, so you got to move stuff around. It can be very, very annoying for someone with OCD like me. But this guest, I really wanted them to do the show, so I had to move some stuff around. That's Cristo Ropolo. What a name. Cristo Ropolo. Curse of the Man That Sees UFOs. The documentary, if you haven't seen it, check it out. It's got some really great UFO footage on it. And it's on Netflix. I bought it off eBay, but basically it's about a guy that attracts UFOs, and I could relate because I've attracted UFOs all my life. Every house I move to, weird stuff happens, and people see it with multiple witnesses. Talked about this with Jose Stevens, shamanism last week. We talk about it every show. But this guy made a documentary about it, and it has some great footage, and he's funny, and he's always dropping the F-bomb, so we got to be careful on the show next week. But the footage, basically the footage that he has, knows that he's watching and interacts, and I don't believe he's doing any sleight of hand or anything. I think it's the real deal Holyfield, because a lot of the footage, I've seen the same exact stuff, and I've met people all over the world. I've met shamans all over the world who are having the same exact experiences as he's having, as I'm having, the same experiences all over the world, seeing these things in the sky. Some of them I think are beings, like, I don't know, spirits. I don't know what they are. But light beings, I've had many light being experiences. God knows I've talked about that so much I probably drove Wham insane talking about me seeing light beings. And Ron Howard's Cocoon. But I think some of the stuff he could be seeing maybe his deceased loved ones out of their bodies. But I'm going to ask him. We're going to find out, see what's going on. But nonetheless, we had the show with Jose Stevens was excellent. He studied with shamans all over the world. That was a good show if you missed it. Oh, one more announcement before we get to our guest. Neil Donald Walsh, Conversations with God. I believe you're going to be here with me for that one, Jay. So it's only going to be an hour, so I'll probably be dominating, but I'm going to try to give you some room at the end.
That's cool, man. I'm just here to back you up.
Yeah, I'll need it because I'll need you mostly for that second hour.
Yeah.
But and plus an hour, that goes real fast, man. An hour.
It does.
A blink in time on radio. But I've been trying to get Neil Donald Walsh forever. His books kept me out of jail back in the day. And we're going to be talking about his new book. And he actually gets into extraterrestrials in his new book. So that should be interesting for sure. Him getting into extraterrestrials is kind of peculiar, so that should be interesting. Very soft-spoken on all the stuff I've listened to him on. So it's going to be surreal, that's for sure. It's weird when you've read someone's books all your life, like Jeffrey Mishlove was on, about PK Man and Roots of Consciousness, and then Jose Stevens, shamanism, like Serge Kahali King, Huna shamanism. Like when you read their books in your early 20s, and then next thing you know, you're in your 40s and you're interviewing them, it just feels really weird. Definitely gives you some moments there. So I'm sure I'm probably going to definitely need your help here, Neil Donald Walsh. I feel really surreal.
Yeah, not a problem, man.
Peculiar. I'm very excited about tonight's show. It's an official first ever weed show, man. How you doing, Stephen?
Very well, thanks, Jeffrey.
Great to have you here. Your first official weed show.
I'm honored. Send me a badge after the show, will you?
We talk about it all the time, but we've never done a whole show on it. We've never had a guest just on that subject, you know. And your book is Cannabis and Spirituality, an Explorer's Guide to an Ancient Plant Spirit Ally. Edited by Stephen Gray, forward by Julie A. Holland, M.D., and I love it. It was great. Very refreshing to have so many different perspectives on weed, especially since I like weed. So it definitely, it was just so many perspectives that I wasn't used to. So it's definitely a mind-bending, positive experience to read all these different perceptions and everything of it. And then the shamanism stuff, that was excellent. Loved all that as well. I study shamanism heavily, have since my early 20s, mostly books and documentaries and stuff. Like I was telling Jose Stevens, it's like I grew up in Georgia, so I was like, I'm never going to meet a shaman probably. But now I'm interviewing them, so that is kind of it's definitely surreal, you know. But so what got you into this book with Inner Traditions, I thought. But no, there's Park Street Press. But I got to you through Inner Traditions. So Park Street Press is the publisher, and somehow this book is connected to Inner Traditions, because that's how I got to you.
Yes. Well, Inner Traditions is the umbrella company, and they have 2 or 3 different imprints for, focusing more in one area or another. And Park Street Press is the one that tends to focus more on medicinal spirit plants and such, as well as other things. But that's why this one got channeled into Park Street Press. It's Inner Traditions, Bear and Company, Park Street Press. They're all the same thing, but the umbrella organization is Inner Traditions.
Nice. So what got you drawn into this book?
Yeah, well, it depends on how much time we have or how much people would be interested in my history, but I'll just really briefly go back to my sometimes wayward and sometimes not so wayward youth, because at my age group, just to put things in perspective for people, I better tell you how old I am. I'm in my mid to late 60s at this point, which means I came of age in the mid to late 60s. Or more of the late 60s for me up in Canada. Took a little while for everything to migrate up from California, etc. But that was the era of the hippies, as they've come to be called. But we tended at the time to refer to it as a counterculture, a subculture that countered the mainstream culture at the time. And so there was an explosion of interest in spirituality, particularly of Asia, and that dovetailed at the same time and was in fact triggered by a lot of experiences that people were having with psychedelics. So I got very interested in all that back then, and that included cannabis, although I didn't think of it as a spiritual medicine at the time. Skip 30 years or so, of my interest. I've always been involved in some kind of spiritual path work, Tibetan Buddhism, and so on. I got back interested again in the psychedelics, as it were, in the 90s, and connected myself to several different traditions, including the Native American Church that uses peyote in their ceremonies. And one thing led to another there. I'm giving this the sort of the half-long version of this, Jeffrey. I got involved with co-organizing a conference up here in Vancouver, British Columbia, called the Spirit Plant Medicine Conference, and met a lot of really interesting people. And so that conference is about offering, responsible, accurate, inspirational, visionary information about the development of the use of psychedelics, how to use them carefully, sustainably, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And it started to occur to me that cannabis was not being given the kind of attention that it deserves as a spiritual medicine, because there is an ancient and widespread history on this planet of that kind of use. It goes way back, probably a lot more than we even know, because I'm sure you know that evidence, historical evidence, gets expunged a lot of the times. But for example, there's archaeological evidence from the Neolithic era, approximately 7,500 years ago, of shamans with cannabis residue seeds, etc., smoking equipment in their grave sites. So, it goes back, the use of cannabis as a spiritual medicine goes back at least that far. And so somehow it started to dawn on me about 5 or 6 years ago that while cannabis use was at the time, and of course even more so now, was spreading rapidly throughout the cultures, this one particular use of cannabis, which many people would say might even be its most potent and powerful use, was as a spiritual medicine. And I started to think that needed some redressing. And I got some support along the way. One thing led to another. Kind of everything just fell into place. Before I knew it, I had 17 other contributors and a deal with Inner Traditions. And that's what the book is for.
Nice. And what were your books before this?
I have one other book from about 6-7 years ago called Returning to Sacred World. As I mentioned a few moments ago, my whole adult life I've been involved in one kind of spiritual path or another, and studied and read a lot, meditated a lot, stuff like that, done yoga, all these things. And so at that time, this was my attempt to put everything I'd learned and encountered and studied in one place. So it's somewhat broad, inspired by, as I mentioned, my Tibetan Buddhist years, 20 years or so, and my experience with the Native American Church and with ayahuasca religions and ceremonies and different things like that. And so I sort of threw all that into that book. Yeah.
Nice. Well, the show's 2 hours with an 8-minute break. How long are you good for? I probably forgot to ask.
Yeah, no, I'm good for the whole time, no problem.
Oh, well, that's cool. It goes by pretty fast.
I know.
But there's an 8-minute break, and let me see. I guess the point I'm at is I've smoked pot all my life pretty much, and it's hard living in the South. I'm from Georgia. Now I'm in Florida, and there's just such, when it comes to the law here, they're primitive morons. That's the big thing that's bad about this area. I remember several years ago, I hadn't been out on a date in a long time, and I met some chick on personals, and she came and got me, and I hadn't had weed in a long, long time, and then I went out, and she found me a doobie. This was like 5 years ago. I was about 6 maybe. And anyway, I barely knew this girl, and she pulled over at a gas station, and I'm waiting in the car, and suddenly she runs out of the gas station, and there's a clerk chasing her. I'm like, oh my God. Like, I have OCD and stuff. I mean, I'm kind of agoraphobic on some level. It's not like the movies or anything, but stuff like that freaks me out. And he's chasing her. She gets in the car, about hits him, and I think she did hit him, but it was like just a bump. It didn't kill him or hurt him or anything, but he kind of ran into the car, and she chased out, and I'm in the car freaking out, and I haven't even had the weed yet. I just had a doobie on me, and I had it in my back pocket or something. And anyway, she wrecks the car, and I get out, and the police show up, and they arrest me with one joint. And they didn't charge me. She shoplifted beer, and I had no idea she was going to do it, and I got pegged with her. And I was in shock because I just couldn't believe it was even happening. And I went to jail, and interestingly enough, at that time, I did a Billy the Kid on them. Some people are going to think I'm pretty bad for doing this, but what I did, it was pretty bad. Let's just say I did something that got me out sooner. And when I was 17, I went through testicular cancer and chemo. Well, let's just say when I got put in jail, I pretended I had to go to chemo because I was bald and pale. And they believed it and they let me go. But they gave me a fine and I had to come back and watch some crazy video about men's breasts lactating milk from marijuana and monkeys driving cars drunk. And I had to pay about $300 for one joint. So that's the kind of primitive, crazy insanity that surrounds me when it comes to a plant I love down here in, hee-haw land. I'd love to move. I just can't afford it. So I guess so growing up around, with all that pressure on you all the time with it, it can be stressful. But I don't really go anywhere with it. Sometimes maybe, but not a lot, because I'm always afraid that's going to happen again. And then now, supposedly, medicinal was passed down here, and I don't even know what cities are doing it anymore. Some are suspending it for years. It's so crazy down here, man. It's just nuts. Like some towns, I don't even know what cities are doing the medicinal legally and opening up shops or whatever. I think Tallahassee, but a lot of them are suspending it. And then, of course, you got the Trump administration. Who knows what their psychos are going to do? We'll be lucky if they don't ban medicinal by the time they're done. So I'm just kind of curious, what's your perspective on all that? It's really weird when you're in one state lighting up and you're free as a bird and nothing can happen to you, but the next state you go to jail for half your life.
Yeah, it's very unfortunate. It's a radical misunderstanding, of course. That's not. Those issues are very concerning. To be straightforward, it's not really the focus of the book. There are some very good books on the social history of cannabis, for example. One of my favorites is by Martin A. Lee called Smoke Signals, and there's another one called Rape a Weed. There's several books on that aspect of it that if people are interested in it, would be very interesting for them to read. I would like to try to keep it in the focus of what my book is focusing on, and from that point of view, part of the reason, as I mentioned a little while ago, that cannabis is not understood as a spiritual medicine is because of that kind of misunderstanding. And for those who are interested, I'll just say a little bit about it briefly. First of all, again, the plant has an ancient and widespread history of use as a spiritual medicine on this planet, as well as a whole bunch of other uses. When you read into it a little bit, you see that throughout Africa, Middle East, Europe, Asia, all over the place, cannabis has an extensive history of medicinal use. What's her name? Hildegard von Bingen, abbess from Europe from the 1300s or so. It's in her pharmacopoeia. So it's all over the place. So what happened? Well, interestingly enough, again, this is a little bit of a sidetrack, but I'll go into it anyway a bit. In the second half of the 19th century, roughly, cannabis became very popular as a medicine in the United States and Canada. And you could go into any little pharmacy, apothecary, and get tinctures and all kinds of different things. It was recommended for a whole range of medicinal purposes. It got a little bit taken over by some of the pharmaceuticals that came along in the early 20th century. But trying to avoid using swear words here, the unwanted stuff hit the fan seriously, starting in around the 1920s and into the 30s in particular. And there was this real nasty piece of work named Harry J. Anslinger. He was the first head of the newly formed Federal Bureau of Narcotics, later DEA. And to advance his career and for several other twisted motives, he engineered largely a campaign of disinformation about cannabis at the participation of like William Randolph Hearst in his nasty San Francisco, I think it was Telegraph or Examiner newspaper. They created the whole reefer madness thing. So there were two sort of major streams about what was going on then. then, and one was it was Anslinger advancing his career by pulling on people's fears, just kind of like what's going on now in the United States. And so it was a classist, racist thing. It was anti-black. It was anti-Mexican, etc. That was the one stream. The other interesting thing that was going on at the time was the DuPont Corporation, and I think maybe some others, but I'm not sure about that. They had been developing petroleum-based products during that period of time, and they wanted hemp out of the way. They weren't interested in going after the female plant, the psychoactive one. They wanted to get hemp out of the way because hemp was being used for all the products, many of the products that the petroleum-based nylon-type products could replace. So they also supported this misinformation, disinformation campaign, and so there was this. But they couldn't go after hemp. There was nothing wrong with hemp. Farmers all over the United States were using hemp, growing hemp, and they were using it for all kinds of different things: paint, cosmetics, oil-based things of all kinds, sails, clothing, building materials, you name it. So that was like going after mom and apple pie. So they couldn't go after hemp. So they demonized the female plant in the ways, with the racist, classist nonsense. And then they passed this act, I think 1937, the Marijuana Tax Act or something, and it just outlawed all of it. So we're just barely coming back from that now. And when you were talking about the insanity and the stupidity of what's going on, it's all based on this misinformation and fear and self-interest in a lot of cases, because the pharmaceutical industry, for example, in Arizona, there was a medical marijuana ballot initiative in your last election, and the company, or a company that's majorly involved in the production of fentanyl, which you probably know is deadly, but $500 million, I believe it was. Maybe I'm wrong there. No, maybe it was 500,000. Anyway, they put a lot of money into the No campaign. Why? Because cannabis can't be patented until you start making specialized medicines out of it. But basically, as I say, and others say in my book, it's the people's medicine. It belongs to us. It always has. It always must. And so I am actually, following still on your question, I am actually optimistic. I think that snowball is getting bigger as it goes down the hill. And, you now have 29 states, if I'm not mistaken, that have legalized medical marijuana. You have, I think, 6 that have legalized it for recreational and all other purposes. And the conversation is just changing. The stigmas are going. Sanity is, poking its head up from under the covers, So, Jeff, unfortunately, some of those other states are going to be the last guys on board, but they are going to get dragged into this. It's just a matter of time. So if you can't afford to move, don't give up hope.
Definitely. I know they just said that the White House said they'll be enforcing medicinal. It seems like they're going to let slide, but the other they're not. But I guess, and I've also wondered if that's why they were outlawing it so bad, because they know that it's such a powerful thing to the spirit. What are some of the shamanism aspects in this book, and ayahuasca and how it ties in with the shamans and stuff like that?
Okay, well, that's sort of jumping into a somewhat more advanced way of talking about it, or use it, I suppose. But as you ask, I'll answer it. There are 2 chapters in the book. One is by Mariano da Silva, and the other one is by a fellow going by the name Francisco. And they both are very involved with ayahuasca work. Mariano is an ayahuasca shaman from Brazil who's been working with ayahuasca for many, many years in ceremonies and so on. And he's been also working with cannabis, which he calls Santa Maria or Saint Mary, for many years. And Francisco is more of an apprentice shaman, I guess you could say, ceremony leader and so on. But in his tradition, he and his people also, it's an ayahuasca using tradition, but they also consider cannabis a sacred plant. And So they use it in different ways, but it's always with a sense of kind of treating it as a spirit medicine, as a sacred plant. And one of those ways is they will occasionally use the cannabis within the ayahuasca ceremony. And they do it very carefully. They do it in a specific way at a specific time. In his chapter in the book, Mariano talks about, first of all, he doesn't do this with the public ayahuasca groups that he leads. He only does it with people that he knows well, sort of an inner group that he trusts and knows can handle it, because the cannabis actually strengthens the effect of the ayahuasca. We were talking about ayahuasca in itself as an extremely powerful medicine, and cannabis actually can potentiate the effects of ayahuasca. So what they do is they'll do they have their ceremonies, they do songs and different things and silent sitting meditation and so on, and they take the ayahuasca right at the beginning, and then they have another round maybe 2.5 hours later, and after that second round, is if they're going to do cannabis, they do it then. They pass a joint around or a pipe or whatever. And as Mariano puts it, it's absolutely essential that there be both external and internal silence. So you got to quiet the voices in your head, just empty yourself. And he said, what can happen then is that, in his words, more or less, the ayahuasca takes you to the top of the mountain, and the Santa Maria gives you wings to fly in the wind. So it potentiates it. And I've had that experience with some of these other medicines commingled with cannabis. Other people have written and talked about it. And so that's one way of using it. And for anyone listening to this who's considering doing something like that, I would say be very careful. We're not talking about casually doing this, because it can feel like you've just doubled the effects of the other medicine, for example. Okay. So another way that they use it is at the end of the ceremony. And even when they use it sometimes later in the ayahuasca ceremonies, it can have both a potentiating effect and a sort of soothing effect, where it can calm the sort of edgy energy of the ayahuasca for some people. And that helps them process what they're learning from the ayahuasca better, the spiritual lessons that they're learning about their lives and so on. So it has that effect too, a kind of a smoothing effect. And it can also enhance your ability to communicate and have clear thinking about that, which is another way that cannabis can be used in general. And then at the end of the ceremony, the end of the ayahuasca ceremony, they will sometimes pass a joint around so that they can have a sharing session, and it seems to loosen up the tongue and help kind of cement the insight, so to speak. And the final way that those people use it while still treating it as a sacred medicine is, apart from some just general casual use, but not much as far as I can tell, is that they will still treat it do it in a kind of meditative way. For example, Mariano says that he likes to do it on the weekend because he's busy with people a lot and things, during the weekdays. And then on a weekend, he lives in the jungle. He said he will go for a walk in the jungle and do some what he calls special meditations, just on his own. So he has this, very pure, clear, simple relationship with the plant. And he said when you use it that way, it can have what he calls transcendental effects. And which brings up another important issue, which is very open for discussion, but it's still important, and that is how frequent people are using the plant. I know a lot of people use it daily. A lot of people need to use it daily for medicinal reasons, and that's great. That's absolutely wonderful and necessary for a lot of people. And other people also are able to use cannabis skillfully in their daily lives in a not directly medical way or medicinal way, because it's referred to as a homeostatic balancer. And for some people, light dosages, maybe 2 or 3 times a day or whatever, can put them into a calm, clear, more relaxed zone that actually improves their functionality. Not like stoner kind of thing, but actually improves their functionality. So that's another way to use it. But if you are talking about the kind of stuff that is talked about a lot in this book, kind of doing deeper work with cannabis where as an amplifier, it can really allow you to go deeper into the present, into nowness, into opening your spirit, opening your heart, calming down into a state of peace even, then it's probably better to do it less frequently because the effects are sharper and deeper in a sense oftentimes. That's not a hard and fast rule, but it is a general guideline.
Yeah, I always wonder if I do it too much, and then I know compared to other people I don't. So.
Yeah.
Let's get Jay over here on the microphone. Go ahead, Jay.
Hey, the book has how many authors are in there? 10, and all different types of backgrounds. And it says it's going to change your perspective on the marijuana. So I've been saying to people the last few years, once Colorado reported its sales tax income from the recreational marijuana, that all the states would probably follow suit within the next 5 years. And there's been 2 more states since Colorado has made it recreational. I'm curious what your perspective and projection is on that. How many states do you think are going to fall, and how fast?
Well, I did refer to that in one of my rants a few minutes ago. There, I'm optimistic. You said 5 years. Well, Colorado was 2012, so it hasn't quite happened yet. But the understanding of the plant is changing rapidly. Yes, of course, there's the entrepreneurial benefits are extensive. Obviously, tax benefits for the state. Stimulating a business, offering jobs, et cetera, health benefits. The understanding of this medicine, of this plant, is changing rapidly. This old sort of, drug, it's a drug, it's the stoner drug, all that stuff. That's all nonsense. People can misuse the plant. It's something we address in the book. They can definitely misuse it. But overall, it's heading, in the right direction. There are, I think, we've got, as far as the state level legalization, you've got Alaska, California, Oregon, and Colorado have fully legalized it for those purposes. And as I mentioned earlier, I think 29 states have now legalized it for medicinal use. So people, your sort of average, suburban, granny or whatever is now starting to discover that get this out of your mind altogether that it's some kind of illegal drug. Just get that stigmatic concept out of your mind. It's for those people, and we're not even talking about its spiritual use. That's almost kind of like going to come in on the coattails of the medicinal understanding of the plant. But for your sort of granny down the road here, she's starting to discover that this is a great plant for her health. It gets rid of some of her pain, or sometimes a lot of it. If people haven't made a study of this at all, it's mind-blowing how many different kinds of medicinal benefits. And again, this is not even my area of focus or expertise, but I do keep up with what's going on. It can shrink tumors with various types of cancerous tumors. The list goes on. There are 20, 30, 40, 50 different types of physical conditions, medicinal conditions, diseases, etc., that cannabis is starting to show significant promise in alleviating or diminishing one way or the other. So that's changing fast, and people are going to discover this more and more, even while the pharmaceutical industry fights back. And, these politicians are often in the pockets of those kinds of corporations anyway. So, there is opposition, but it's just a snowball effect at this point, as far as I'm concerned. I would say probably, you can put, if I'm not mistaken, I'm up here in Canada, but if I'm not mistaken, you can put ballot initiatives on the ballot even in the midterm elections. And so 2018 will probably see a little more activity, 2020 in the presidential election time. And I would think by 2024, this is just a wild prediction, but I would think by 2024, it will be way more clear that it's going all the way, and it'll be ridiculous for the hang back states,
Yeah, I have to agree with you that the perspective is changing, and I hope it's all going in the right direction. The problem is that it's still illegal federally, which I don't understand how it works. If the state wants it to be legal, the feds don't. Somebody has to overrule somebody, and I don't think it should be at the federal level. But anyway, but you also brought up the industry, like assuming the pharmaceutical industry for one, it's one of probably the worst ones. And I guess you addressed this as well. It has been illegal for mainly their reasons. I mean, they're like the main lobbyists behind whatever legislation has been against marijuana, which has been how many years? 50, 60, 70 years, whatever it is.
But 1937.
Yeah. But it fascinates me how it's such a harmless thing, but they put it at the top of the worst level of the DEA drug schedule, and then they call it the gateway drug till that's harmful drugs. And that makes no logical sense to me whatsoever. However, one of my questions I do have, you've spoken about this already, is that it has way ancient origins. What kind of stories did you find about its discovery? How was the plant discovered? And how did they, how would you know to just start eating this or smoking it?
Yeah, well,
you know what I mean?
I think it discovered us, frankly.
Yeah, that's a good perspective.
The lineage that cannabis is from, the Cannabaceae lineage, I believe it's pronounced, is not known for a fact, but it's estimated by the people that study these sorts of things to be between 30 and 90 million years old on the planet. So basically, it's pretty safe to say that cannabis has been growing all over the place since the dawn of civilization as we know them. Of course, I don't know. You guys are into things like some of the UFO stuff. Maybe there are civilizations that are far more ancient than any of the records would suggest. But if we look back, say 12,000 years, for example, when the beginnings of Chinese civilization, the cannabis has been around since the beginning of that. For all kinds of purposes, as I mentioned earlier in the conversation. Everything from food to medicine to oils and clothing and building materials, as well as spiritual understanding. So, shamans have used it. As I mentioned again earlier, researchers have found evidence of cannabis seeds and paraphernalia in the grave sites of shamans from the Neolithic era of approximately 7,500 years ago. It goes way back. It was widespread throughout the Middle East. There's suggestions that it seems extremely unlikely that somebody like Jesus of Nazareth wouldn't have encountered this medicine. There was no stigma against it back then. It was very common. Throughout Africa, shamans have used it, ceremonial use, going back, we don't know for sure. Some researchers speculate almost at the beginnings of the Christian era. It's just a very widespread plant. In India has an extensive history of use. The sadhus, the wandering ascetics, they've probably been using cannabis for at least a couple of thousand years. There's a Greek poet, I think, Herodotus, who was, I don't know the exact dates of Herodotus, but was pre-Christian. And he's kind of famous in my circles for having talked about a group of people called the Scythians from that general area, the sort of the ancient Middle East, Asian area. And they were known for using cannabis in their funerary rites and celebrations. After the funeral, they would gather and get into an enclosed space. And this comes directly from Herodotus, 2,500 years ago or whenever that was, talking about the Scythians throwing big masses of the plant onto a fire in a small closed environment, and as he put it, howling with joy. So there's that. There's the sadhu use of it. It's been used in Buddhist practice, some of the more tantric practices in around like the 11th century, I think it is, in India. There's one I find fascinating called the Mahanirvana Tantra. It was a very, and actually I would like to elaborate on that one a little bit, because one of the themes of the book is recuperating or reclaiming this plant for spiritual, ritual, ceremonial, healing use. And, in this culture we tend to not take the detail of creating environments all that seriously compared to the way ancient peoples and indigenous people all over the planet have done. So in this particular Mahanirvana Tantra, part of the Buddhist world of India at the time, it wasn't really mainstream practice, but it was being done for sure and written about. They took a yogin and a yogini, a man and a woman, who were presumably very experienced already with meditation and yoga and so on. So they were pretty open, spiritually advanced people already. And they put them through a rigorous preparation period of perhaps several weeks, of meditation and, extra levels of meditation and fasting and that sort of thing. And then they brought the couple together in the temple, which, I don't know, for me that's a wonderful image, picture. This is actually happening in the temple, not in the woods or in somebody's basement, and they bring them together with the monks around supporting the whole thing, and they have them drink some cannabis preparation, and very powerful, in larger dosages, which any of you there might have experienced yourself. It can happen with smoked or vaporized cannabis too, but when you take it orally, there's almost no ceiling to the effects. It can be extremely powerful, which it would be a tangent to go into that now, but dosage is very important, and people can overdose in that regard. But with these people, their sort of mind-body channels were presumably wide open. There's no fear, there's no resistance there. So they give them a large dosage after this extensive preparation period. They put them together in sexual union, and the purpose is not to, have a jolly time and have a fine orgasm. The purpose is to be able to stay in this really heightened state for hour after hour, because oral ingestion, of course, allows this to go on. The effects of cannabis will last for hours, of course. So, and the purpose, as they've stated, is to have a total dissolution of the ego, of the illusory, the false separate self that's disconnected from the divine, and enter into that, surrender into that awakened state, what Buddhists would call enlightenment experience, or Japanese Zen Buddhists would call satori, sudden enlightenment kind of experiences. So I just gave some detail about that on purpose as a way to point out that we can, again, that's the purpose of the book. It's forward-looking. It's not deliberately meant to be looking backwards. We can recreate our own ways of meeting this plant in a more reverent, more respectful, quieter, directed, with intention way. And then people have never used it that way, really, quite honestly, have no idea what this plant is capable of. It's I don't know if you gentlemen there are familiar with some of the other psychedelics or entheogens, but cannabis has almost the same power, and it's used skillfully. It's really an advanced spiritual medicine in that regard.
Yeah, I have, and I can tell you that, yeah, I'm familiar with some of the other psychedelics, and you brought up a chapter I was going to ask you about, but you already brought it up. So there's another chapter in your book that is by you, Cannabis and Creativity, and I want to ask you to elaborate on that chapter because I went to an art school, so I think I might have the same perspective on you on that chapter, but it's titled Cannabis and Creativity, a Spiritual Perspective, and that was written by you, yes?
Well, yes, I wrote a fairly short chapter on that, and then I brought in two other contributors, Floyd Salas, who's a writer, a poet, and novelist, award-winning poet and novelist, and a fantastic fine artist or fine jewelry artist named Savea Vach, to also provide some testimonial about it. So I want to step back to this notion of cannabis as an amplifier. And since we have a long time, I think, here, perhaps this is a good moment to start right back at the physiological level, the what you might call the pharmacokinetics of cannabis. Pharmacokinetics is a fancy term describing or to refer to the effects of a plant, or of any medicine, any drug, so to speak, as it comes into the body, as it's processed in the body, and as it's expelled from the body. That's the pharmacokinetics. So Joan Bellow, wonderful writer and advocate for cannabis, who has a book called The Benefits of Marijuana, contributed a chapter to this book called Marijuana and the Body Mind. And she talks a little bit about that function. Again, I'm putting this forth as a kind of a foundation for the ways in which cannabis both functions as a spiritual medicine and a creative aid, which are actually not two separate concepts in my mind anyway. But she talks about how when you first, this process, the trajectory is a lot different when you take it orally, of course, because it can take up to 2 hours to reach full effects. But when you smoke it or vaporize it, when you inhale cannabis, as most of us know, or anyone knows who's done it, the effects are pretty much essentially immediate. But one of the things that happens right away is that there's an increase in heart rate. It's usually not too extreme, depending on dosage, but what's going on with that physiologically is that freshly oxygenated blood is being pumped throughout the system, throughout the mind body, the organism. And as that happens, it allows the muscles, the oppositional muscles, as Joan Bellow calls them, of the rib cage, to relax and expand, allowing for deeper breathing, which then even allows more good blood to travel throughout the system. Other people have referred to it as a vasodilator. Opens up the channels, so to speak, so that you feel more in your body. This is why people find music listening enhanced, for example, and a whole bunch of other functions. Taste buds, munchies, all that sort of thing. And getting into your question, Joe, about the creative assisting aspect of it, because it opens up those channels, it kind of, I don't know how to say this exactly, and everybody's experience is differently, but it seems to open up unexpected ideas, kind of what you might call lateral thinking. You actually get insights, especially, I don't know if everybody would, but if you already have some creative potential to start with, and in my experience, especially if you're focused on something, like it's something you care about, if you're putting your mind to something, whether it's an art project, painting, writing, making music, or, designing a building, whatever it is, creating a course for your next university, session or whatever. When you put your mind on it, and you get the dosage right, the strain right, and all those kind of things, it opens up these channels. It enhances or amplifies these channels, and so insights and information come in that you hadn't seen before. Earlier, Jeffrey asked about the shamanic use. One of the chapters in the book is something like a conversation with two medicine shamans, and one of them talks about this directed use. That he said, you really need to know what you're going to use it for, because it's going to energize whatever your intention is. And I would say that's whether that your intention is conscious or unconscious at any degree or any level. But the way this particular fellow, Steve Dyer, uses it, there are shamans who do medicine ceremonies with psychedelics. They lead these 3-day ceremonies, and they smoke cannabis at the beginning and going into the ceremony, because, as Steve says, it opens a window, and they can see things that they couldn't see before. They can see, get a deeper energetic feeling of where that group is at, that particular group, because every group is different, right? They even see, Steve has talked about this, they both talked about this, but Steve in particular, that when they go to a new location that they haven't been to before, like they're doing the ceremony in a yurt, everybody's lying down kind of thing, and then they will see the spirits of that land come in and want to know what they're doing there. And then they become reassured because Steve and Sean are, their minds and heads are in the right place, so they go, okay, well, welcome to our land then, right? So in other words, it opens up channels, and that's, I think, the way that a lot of people talk about, it gives you a boost, a sharpness, fresh insights, etc. How does that resonate with your experience in that regard, Joe?
Hey, guys. Sorry to interrupt, but I got to go on break so we can pick up when we come back. We're about to go on an 8-minute break. You're listening to 107.7 FM New Orleans, United Public Radio. We'll be back in about 8 minutes. We're going to go on break. We'll be right back. Make sure Joe sees. There we go. All right, give it a couple minutes. Make sure we're off air. Be careful. But, we should be. You got us, Joe? There we go. Joe's trying to provoke me in the chat room.
So can I go take a pee?
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. Don't hang up.
No, I won't. Everything's open. I'll just slip away here for 2 or 3 minutes.
I'll be right back, too. I got to splash my face in the right place of water and pee.
All right.
Friday Night Live. Well, you're listening to United Public Radio, 107.7 FM New Orleans. I'm running on fumes. I've had a week of woman trouble, and let me tell you, if you want some kind of trouble, that's the worst kind to get.
I don't know. Kidney stones suck pretty much too.
Yeah.
I remember the old reggae song, "No Woman, No Cry"?
Yeah.
I've tried that, but
Truth to that.
my penis disagrees.
It's complex.
Yes.
The grass is not greener on either side of the hill, right?
Yes, indeed.
Yeah.
Well, let me see. I know we have a guy coming on about yoga. Let me see. What is his name? I want to talk about cannabis yoga. I think I could swing that.
All right.
So I got a guy coming on, Leonard Perlmutter, The Heart and Science of Yoga in the summertime. He looks like he just got off the Swami boat, the guru boat. I'm just kind of curious, what's cannabis and yoga? Is it just like doing yoga on cannabis?
Yeah.
Or it's more complex?
Well, okay, so for starters, there's a chapter in the book by D. Dussault called Ganja Yoga. Ganja is the term that comes from India for it, and as Dee points out, that history goes way back too. Yoga and ganja have been intertwined for probably at least a couple thousand years, if not longer. There's always, I don't want to get distracted here, but there's always this thing going on in terms of, maybe this is worth saying in terms of cannabis or even the other psychedelics / entheogens in spiritual practice. There are the purists who I consider sort of the dogmatic type people. And then there are the people that are willing to take a risk and open up and experiment and combine things in respectful, skillful ways. So, there are purists that are going to say, oh, no, you can't put drugs in with yoga. I'm sorry, but that's a sort of fearful, controlling, dogmatic attitude, in my opinion. If people heard what I said in the first hour, I talked about cannabis, the pharmacokinetic effects that result in a greater flow of blood, fresh oxygenated blood throughout the whole system, and a loosening of muscular structure. So it's an amplifying substance that way. So if you're, the real purpose of yoga, I think this is probably necessary to say, yoga has become so popular and so common these days that I'm not sure how if everyone understands that these, postures, these asanas, that's part of what's called hatha yoga. And hatha yoga is only one arm of a multi-armed being, as it were. It is probably even one of the lesser ones of the yogic practice, the overall yogic practice, because what the word means is bound or tied or united, and it really means united with the divine. It was a spiritual path for awakening to unconditioned reality. And so they had various practices. They had pranayama, breath practice, a variety of practices. And this is just, to a degree, this is my opinion. I suspect that the Hatha Yoga was one of the sort of minor ones in a sense, because it was, to keep the physical body loose as you did all this, as a foundation for this work. So the real purpose of Hatha Yoga, the core, original, historic purpose of Hatha Yoga, is part of a spiritual path to awaken the spirit. And so with cannabis as an amplifier, when you're doing these practices, it's meant to open you up not just physically and, loosen up your muscles and all that, but it's meant to open you up spiritually, and cannabis can enhance that or amplify that. So I talked earlier about focus, putting your mind in one place. And I haven't said, in my view, enough yet about the importance of getting out of your head. Many spiritual teachings will talk about, or the real ones in my mind anyway, will talk about the necessity of getting out of your head so that you can wake up to some larger unconditioned reality that's not based on just all the stories that you've created to live your life by, right? So yogic practice, Hatha Yoga practice, ideally, you're not thinking, or not thinking much anyway. You're just being empty in the moment. You're paying attention to your breath as you loosen and, relax into the stretch or whatever it is you're doing, right? So there's a potential deepening of experience when you're doing practice like Hatha Yoga. If you combine it judiciously, I would say, carefully, watching out for dosage and so on, and not necessarily relying on it for every time you do yoga. But if you use cannabis in conjunction with, chronologically, like at the same time, essentially, when you're doing your yoga practice, it can have that deepening effect. It can take you deeper. Dee Dussault does a better job than I am right now in her chapter in the book on talking about that. She had this one experience that I can't really do justice to it unless I read it to you. But she talks about essentially making love with the universe, where there's this absolutely overwhelming but ecstatic surrender and openness and unity with sort of the universal, the cosmos altogether somehow, So just as with meditation practice, which is in a sense the pure way to meet the plant in emptiness, in getting out of your head, yoga is what I would call more of a, I talk about this in the book actually, there's a variety of practices you can combine with cannabis, going from what you might call the formless, which is essentially just being still, not doing anything other than just being very, very present. Right? And you might call that just following the breath meditation, for example, to practices that involve more form. And yoga is would be like on the next rung, so to speak, because it's not cerebral particularly, you don't have to really, once you know your postures, your positions, your asanas, you don't have to think about it. You just do them, And so you're able to pay attention. The cannabis, if you think of it as a spirit, which many people do, traditionally indigenous people consider that say that there is a spirit of cannabis or spirits of cannabis. This plant is a kind plant. It wants us to be, awake, as it were. It wants us to feel good. And you can lead yourself into that with your yoga practice. So that's the answer to the Ganja Yoga one, essentially. And by the way, I'd just like to put a plug in for Dee Dussault, because she has a new book out coming from a major publisher, actually, Harper One. It hasn't been released yet, I think April, called Ganja Yoga, where she explores the ideas that are in her chapter in my book at book length. So she's great. She's getting a lot of attention these days. She's getting international press and so on.
I'll have to check that out and maybe get her on the show. What about Jamaica and the Rastafarians? I've always heard they say it's a phone to God. Jeff Brown, his chapter on that.
Yeah. I think I quoted a fellow in the book who said that cannabis is the vehicle to cosmic consciousness. He was a Rastafarian. Yes, well, that's a very interesting one, Jeffrey. And I'm not an expert on the Rastafarians in any way. I tried to track down some good people, and I found one person, excuse me, who had many years involved with a Rasta church called the Ethiopian Zion Coptic Church, which was a Jamaica-based Rasta church that used cannabis as a sacrament. And the thing about the Rastas in Jamaica, from the somewhat limited study I've made of it, is that the plant is intertwined, embedded in their whole life. These multiple uses that I've talked about earlier are very much a part of the communities in Jamaica. But it's also, and they do consider it a religious sacrament. They don't necessarily have to go to church to do it. They can do it in their daily life. They can do it at work, or if they're working in the fields in a sort of non-cerebral kind of work. But it's essential to them in Jamaica, in those communities, in the Rastafarian communities, the black communities in Jamaica. And this particular group, Jeff Brown talks about, they do ceremonies where they smoke a lot, and they have songs, and like that. And he claims that it really empowers their spiritual practice.
Nice. Definitely an interesting culture. No doubt about it. From what I've seen on TV.
Yeah. But, Bob Marley is famous. Let me just finish with this one on that.
Go ahead.
Rasta theme. There's a wonderful little, talk about putting it in a nutshell. Bob Marley, the famous reggae musician who some young people may not know by now, but I hope they do, is famous for having said, "Herb is the healing of a nation."
Definitely.
Yeah.
I've heard it compared to some biblical scripture before. Something like that.
Sure. Yeah. Well, that's a very interesting one too. The historians. There's one chapter in the book I wanted to provide some kind of authenticity to this extensive and ancient history that I mentioned of cannabis for use in spiritual context. And so, right off the bat, I think it's chapter 2. It's called Venerable Traditions by Chris Bennett. And Chris Bennett is a internationally known scholar on the use of cannabis in religion and ritual practice. And so he just goes through, a lot of them. It's kind of a survey. There's the evidence is a little sketchy about the connection to Christianity in the Bible, but as I mentioned back in hour 1 there, that plant was everywhere in the Middle East at that time. And there's no way that people would have missed it. It was everywhere. As far as there's no record of any kind of programming, against it, there doesn't appear to have been any stigma at the time. People didn't have these same kind of uptight attitudes about so-called drugs and substances, in many of these cultures. And so it's almost certain that it was around and used a lot. And some researchers, I personally, to be honest, think that the evidence is a little skimpy on really proving this. But there's a lot of references to smoke and incense and stuff in various parts of the Bible. Jeff Brown talks about it a little bit. Other researchers have also talked about this. So I would say it's not given, it's not certain, but there's a pretty good chance, and intuitively it feels very likely that cannabis was used spiritually in the area where Jesus was, by people like him and his disciples and all those kinds of people. And, we know now from the historical record and from our own personal experiences that when you use it skillfully with intention, cannabis can open up the spiritual channels, absolutely. And so there's absolutely no reason why people wouldn't have found that back then, too,
So you think Jesus lit up?
I'm not going to I'm not going to go out on a limb and say that I would know that, because I don't think anybody knows that. But
I just had to ask you, you know.
Oh, yeah. But that's just to repeat essentially. There is definite hints and allegations, as it were, that the plant was used. They talk about the whole. Oh yeah. So this is one of the ones that these researchers like to talk about. Is they call it it's called a holy anointing oil. Well, anointing originally meant kind of a transmission of initiation, of opening, right? So there's a good chance that the holy anointing oil in the early days of Christianity was indeed cannabis oil, and that it did in fact have these spiritual benefits for people. Some people even go as far as saying is that the famous story of the burning bush referred to cannabis, but I don't think there's any.
I never heard that one.
I don't think there's any solid. I don't think there's any solid evidence for that actually.
So that the bush was the actual ganja? That's what the rumor goes? Yeah.
Well, remember the Scythians that I mentioned a while ago, right? They used to throw massive amounts of it onto a fire in an enclosed space and howl with joy, So, yeah, who knows? I'm not going to make any claims here, and it's not my field of expertise anyway. But just to sum up again, I think it's very, very possible that cannabis was an intimate part of people's spiritual experience in the Middle East at the time of Jesus and long before that.
Definitely. Well, some of my experiences that I've noticed on it before, just to summarize, I had cancer when I was 17. I had testicular cancer, and then a few years later my dad died, and I started seeking the occult and spiritual heavily. I didn't really practice the occult. I just read a lot of weird stuff. And I experimented with drugs, and I believe I opened up doorways, and I started to have UFO experiences, and multiple witnesses would see them as well and agree that I was attracting them on some level. So every house I moved to, it would follow me. And I also saw a wide variety of beings, different sorts. Some were very serpentine-like, that were like holograms. People would call them reptilians, but it was weird because they looked like something out of a sci-fi, like R2-D2 showing a hologram of, the Death Star or whatever. It looked like a hologram. And another time, little beings in cloaks standing around a black box. And my cat went to jump on them, and they vanished. And I had a friend with me at that time who saw them as well. But one of the big ones that I've had is I see light beings, like people made out of light. And after my dad died, I saw one on the cloud top standing, and it was doing its finger like naughty because we had been partying, and my friend was driving down a dirt road, and I know he was under the influence. And we both got out of the car, and we both saw it. Well, several years ago from this house, I went outside and looked back at my house, and I saw two beings of light fly out of my roof into the heavens, and I was completely sober. But one thing I've noticed lately is since I didn't do weed for a very long time because I couldn't find it, and finally I did, and I started seeing those light beings more. And it's to a point now to where I've seen them like around the planet on some level. I can wake up at night and look into the heavens, and there's stars, and then there's these weird, like, clusters, and it looks like groups of them together. And I wonder if there's a quantum realm around the Earth where we go that's a staging area where we die, and that's where we reside in. But I had a shaman on from Peru, Don Oscar, from Sounds True, and then also Jose Stevens last week from Sounds True. And Jose Stevens says he's interacted with these light beings before, and they taught him stuff. And then Don Oscar said that, this really blew my mind, that down in Peru they'll meet in crowds and watch the shining ones in the sky, and that I was correct about what I thought they were, us without our bodies. But he said they were also us from the future, and went into some weirdness about that. But it was just strange that he was talking about them meeting and watching these things in the sky. Well, my thing is, it seems like cannabis has made it kind of more open to see them on some level. And I do believe on some level that's what we are, luminous beings on some level. There's all kinds of theories about what they are. I've heard everything from advanced aliens to us with outer bodies to, I even saw something the other day, some weird FBI paperwork claiming that there's light beings and weird stuff from the government. It was like some weird top secret paperwork highlighted. It looked legit. I don't know if it was. Who knows? But they were talking about the light beings and celestial intruders and all kinds of crazy.
Yeah.
But one thing I have noticed on cannabis, like I said, is it does open you up to a level.
Yeah,
to me, on some level, it seems to be psychic and let me see weird stuff, and that's all I really do is that and kratom, and that's it. I used to do a lot worse back in my younger days, but now that's it for me. But I'm just kind of curious, what are some of the superpowers, I'm into superheroes and comic books, that cannabis gives you? I know you said open up the heart and like, what else are some things with abilities that you know of?
Yeah, well, that's an interesting question. This whole issue of the light is very interesting because, the light is the sort of core metaphor for enlightenment or connection with the divine, right? I've had lots of experience with other psychedelic or entheogenic medicines, and, I've never associated with aliens, associated those experiences with any kind of alien contact per se, but I've definitely had experience with light, like in the Native American church peyote ceremonies of light coming down from above, that kind of thing. And the elders, the native people in those meetings often talk about when spirits come in. I'd like to tie this back to the importance of using the plant skillfully, and that the potential is much greater. And there's a discipline and a focus, and what's sometimes referred to as a container. One of the chapters in the book is some suggestions for how people might do cannabis in a ceremonial context with others. The Native American church, for example, they create an amazing container. These meetings are held in teepees. There's a fire in the middle, just treated as a spirit. And in fact, I've been told by an elder, or the whole group was told one morning after an all-night ceremony, he said, relatives, pay attention to that fire. It has things to teach you, So, like, what these, others are, you could speculate, but really there is some kind of intelligence guiding or, in this universe, which is perhaps the ultimate. You could call it God, you can call it whatever you want. But there's some spiritual energy and guidance that's in non-human form, and it often appears as light. So what I was going to say about the Native American church is when the elders talked about this, they create this container. They pray a lot. They do a bunch of things to create a beautiful, safe, solid container for doing the work, and then they pass the peyote medicine around and sing these chant-like songs and so on that are actually prayers. They're very powerful people in a powerful ritual container. And when things are working well, and people, this is why I keep talking about the necessity of inner silence, of quieting the monkey mind down, the ongoing thoughts that obscure the radio signals, as it were. And they can get people to be settled and calm, and the empowering, amplifying effect of that peyote medicine, the spirit comes into the teepee, they say. And the way it appears, and they'll talk about this, like the next morning, and they'll say, well, yeah, right around that particular time, just as the medicine had gone around once around the teepee, I saw, this light, and somebody else said, yeah, I saw that light right at that time too, So the spirit often comes in as a light, as a little focal point of light or something like that. So again, as you've said yourself, Jeff, the cannabis, as I've talked about earlier in our conversation, is an amplifying, releasing, relaxing, channel opening substance when it's used skillfully. And so, yes, any experience, what you've talked about, you're obviously really sensitive. You're really tuned into this kind of stuff. So cannabis can open those channels further, So as far as, superpowers, I don't really know. I don't even really know what a superpower is. I would just like to keep falling back on my standard, understanding that wherever you put your focus, it depends on what you call a superpower. Like, again, I mentioned Steve, Shaman Steve, the medicine shamans, that Steve said it opens a window to look into, you can see into places you couldn't see before. And as I said earlier, when they do a ceremony in a new location, the ancestor spirits of that land will often come to check them out to see if they're, genuine, if their intention is good and stuff like that. And he doesn't see that stuff as easily when he's not under the influence of that medicine. So that maybe some people would call that a superpower, that you can see non-human beings and energies more easily, and all those medicines, all those psychedelic medicines potentially do, the kind of things that you're talking about, like little men standing around the black box. Ayahuasca, ayahuasca testimonials talk about that kind of thing. Psilocybin experiences. Terence McKenna, this wonderful kind of psychedelic philosopher from mostly the sort of 70s to the 90s, died in 2000. He talks about DMT experiences where you're suddenly, like, DMT comes on like seconds, basically. And if you get a powerful DMT experience, you can be in a completely other place, like completely, even if your eyes are open sometimes. I haven't experienced this, to be honest, but other people talk about this and write about it. And McKenna talks about seeing these elf-like creatures, and they want to communicate with them. That's the interesting thing. They want to communicate with you, and they want to show you things. They want to show you what humanity is capable of. Just to kind of finish off that line of thinking, I'd like to say that this, although the potential for humans is vast and limitless, really, the reality of where we are kind of overall on the planet at this point, very limited spiritually. We have hardly begun. It's as if we're sitting in this vast, extremely sophisticated, extremely complicated vehicle, and we have no idea that we're even there, let alone knowing what button does what. We're just beginning to understand as a species. I hope that's an optimistic view. We're just beginning to understand what we're capable of. I mean, this is what Buddhist teachings, for example, have been trying to tell us for 2,500 years, that everybody's a Buddha. And Buddha, the word, just means awake. It doesn't mean like, he's a god or something. It was just a man who, the story goes, he saw through all the illusions, landed on enlightenment, and went, oh yeah, this is coming home. This is what's real. Not a position. It's not a dogma. It's not a set of beliefs. It's just what's real. And everyone has that potential, right? So the ultimate purpose, cannabis is a tool. The ultimate purpose is to wake up, become sane. That's what Buddhist teachings say about enlightenment. It's just basic sanity. Everything else is on a level insane because it's just the stories you make up in your head. That from your conditioning as a kid and what your culture is telling you and what you tell yourself and all that. But reality is found by being, getting out of the head and relaxing more and more deeply into the moment. And again, just to tie it back into cannabis, if I may, that because it's an amplifying substance, cannabis can empower that potential.
Definitely, and that's one thing I've always been attracted to. Puts you in a different reality that seems a lot more comfortable than normal, ordinary reality. That's for sure.
Yeah, well, in Buddhist teachings they talk about effortlessness, that, and that they talk about the illusory false self, the ego, as being an experience of ongoing struggle, So that's the big confusion that people have, that we have to struggle like crazy, So I'd like to just say in the sort of spiritual point here is that, again, I'm using Buddhist ways of talking about it, not because they're exclusive about that, but just because I have experience with that path and that language. They talk about the journey of spiritual awakening being one that starts on one end of the continuum, with not trusting the primordial or unconditioned intelligence whatsoever, and only guiding our lives through these narratives, these stories, these beliefs that we have about reality. It's all secondhand information. It's all in our heads, right? So the journey starts there, and gradually we shift our allegiance as we're starting to wake up to beginning to trust the awakened state, beginning to trust that we have this unconditional intelligence at all times that we can relax into. And it's, that's all one can say about it, really, because other than that, we just have to experience it. If that doesn't make sense to someone listening to this, there's really nothing more I can say other than perhaps maybe that's what faith is. People talk about religious faith. And having some even tentative or very, temporary, tentative is the word, faith that there is this possibility that if we relax and let go of these sort of struggling, fearful narratives we have, that life becomes much richer, much better, much more fun, much sweeter, much more loving, much more creative.
Nice. And so this interview you did with the shaman, who was he? I just had his name and I lost the place. I read it when I was
Mariano?
No, Souther or something?
Oh, Hamilton Souther, yeah.
Yeah, Souther.
Yeah.
What's that about? That's mostly working with spirits, like literally spirits?
That's what he says. He talks about what he calls the head medicine spirits of cannabis. And he said, well, he's big on, I've talked, in various ways at various times throughout our conversation here about, containers and rituals and, intention and all that kind of thing with cannabis. Hamilton is pretty clear that by far the most powerful way to benefit from cannabis is in a ceremonial shamanic type of context with a skilled shaman. To be honest, I don't necessarily agree with that completely. I think cannabis is a very forgiving plant and we can create our own relationship with it. We don't necessarily, in my view, have to be working with a shaman. But I'll grant some credence to what Hamilton is saying there, which is the shaman can direct energies, can pull in energies. If he or she has this open relationship with the medicine spirits, okay? Because remember, he started with ayahuasca. He was leading ayahuasca ceremonies down in Colombia or somewhere for a dozen years or so before he moved to Colorado and started his cannabis ceremonies. So, if he's telling it as it is, he had a lot of experiences with spirits, medicine spirits of ayahuasca. Now, for example, the genuine, as far as I can tell from all my practice and study, the genuine ayahuasca shamans, they learn the healing songs that they use in their ceremonies. They're called icaros in Spanish. They use these songs for specific purposes. And in fact, I've been told by one shaman that the songs actually announce themselves, like that they're actually beings. And they'll come in and a particular song that the shaman already knows, but it's in his kit bag, will come in to his attention in a particular situation for a particular person in the ceremony, and this song will basically say to him, you need me now. I'm the song for this person for their needs right now, right? So these are healing songs. And Hamilton uses icaros in his cannabis ceremonies as well. So, yeah, all I can say about that is from, the interview, what I know from him directly, which is he says that he has contact with what he calls the head medicine spirits, that they guide him the ceremonies when he's working with them. And, I don't know other than what he says. However, it certainly dovetails or resonates with the way that ayahuasca shamans talk about their work as well. That the spirits, and also the people that run the roadmen, the ceremony leaders of the Native American Church talk about it like this too. That one night, this elder said to the group, he said, relatives, when I say the spirit talks to me, I mean it literally. He said, when I'm running this meeting, and I eat this peyote medicine, the spirit comes and says, well, Caducus, this person over here, they're suffering in this particular way. You need to do this for them. You need to sing this particular song. You need to go over there and smudge them, or you need to give them a little extra medicine to get them over the hump, or pray for them, or whatever, you know. So there's this is going on, and this is the whole thing with the medicine spirits.
Definitely fascinating, no doubt about it. Well, we got about 9 minutes or so let's get a J question in here or so, and then we'll have to close out.
Yeah, fine.
Yeah, I kind of have. I'm here. I have sort of a technical question for you. So, with this book, you edited all these different authors. So, how was that process? How did you have more than just these 10 authors you looked at, or did you have, like, say, 50, or did each author offer you more than one entry? How did you assemble the book, essentially?
Well, first of all, including me, there are actually 18 contributors. And then if you add Julie Holland in, who wrote a short but really beautiful little foreword, there's 19 of us all together. And no, I didn't talk to a whole bunch of other people. I knew of these people from their past reputations and from personal contact and so on. And I petitioned them and asked them to write. There were a few people that I contacted who didn't respond or didn't agree to participate. But no, I didn't turn away a bunch of people. People weren't soliciting me. I was soliciting them. And then as far as the actual editing process, most of it I didn't really do a lot of editing myself. I'm not what you'd call a professional editor. Some of the people are not really writers that have contributed to the book, so I help them clean up their language and their phrasing and make it a little more concise and clearer sometimes. Others, who more or less are writers, like Kathleen Harrison is a beautiful writer who wrote this wonderful chapter at the beginning of the book called Who Is She? She's a beautiful writer. I love her writing. I wouldn't touch her writing. I probably changed 2 or 3 words in a 10-page chapter, But then it also goes to, after I'm done with it, and then of course I put it in a certain put the chapters in a certain sequence, et cetera, and then I send it off to Inner Traditions, and they have their own team. They have their, what do you call them, line editors, copy editors, I'm not sure the correct term, go through it, and then they engage in a process with you. It's all done electronically. They send it back to you with the way it's set up in Word, so that you can see markups in the margin, in the side, and it shows you where they've made a change. And if you click on it, it shows you what they've changed it from and to, and then you have to approve all those. So there were certain times when they would change things, and I go, no, that's really not what I meant, In fact, even little micro details sometimes, like they'll put in a comma that wasn't there. And I'll go, no, that actually changes the meaning of the sentence. I want to keep it like this, But
right.
that's their job. And they didn't do, I don't know, I don't want to boast, but I think I sent them a fairly decent manuscript because they didn't do a lot of editing. And they certainly didn't mess with the content much at all. They basically, it was just kind of grammatical stuff, flow, different, how sentences are constructed. And occasionally the editor would, add a comment like, Stephen, I don't understand this comment. Could you rephrase that one? That sort of thing. So there was there's 3 or 4 back and forths over, 2 or 3 months there. And then that's it, it's off to them. Yeah.
Very cool. And this is maybe sort of a leading question for the future, but the chapters in this book, and basically the gist of this book was the spiritual and shamanism type uses, and as well as medical uses for what the benefits are. Any plans in the future maybe for a book that has the industrial uses, like for textiles and paper and even oils and other things that we're working on machineries? I think that would be a pretty good subject as well.
Absolutely. Well, you know what? I don't think that's going to be me, but I'm not worried about it because People are on the case. We got a good team on the case, as it were. There's so much interest in cannabis these days. There's a conference coming up in Vancouver, and there's conferences like this happening all over the place, actually. And I'm somebody who's, trying to keep up with what's going on in the field. And when I went to this conference last year, I was surprised at how much is going on. There's a conference in May up here in Vancouver. It's called the Cannabis Hemp Conference and Expo. And last year, they did it mostly with panels. So this woman, Salome, is her name, brought in 40 or 50 people from all over North America to talk about every aspect of cannabis use. And the innovation, the exploration, the research that's going on would floor you if you don't know about it. I mean, they're talking about cannabis for building materials of all kinds, like cannabis for insulation, replacing cement even, for certain kinds of uses. Everything, all the different ways that you can deliver the product, turning it into oils and tinctures and so on. And there's a lot of innovation and research going on in that area because there's different ways to do it, some involving more harmful chemicals and some more natural, et cetera, et cetera. It's an exploding field. There are conferences all over North America on cannabis and hemp. And, the word hemp's in there for a reason because sometimes people use hemp to refer to both the male and the female plant. But typically hemp is more commonly used to describe the male plant. And for people who don't know, the male plant is not psychoactive, but it's the one that tends to be used for all these other these industrial uses, as you say. So that book isn't going to come from me, I don't think, Joe. But I think you'll be seeing a lot more on, it's exploding. It really is.
Yeah, I spoke about that also in the first hour about how the book, one of the reviews on the back says it's a warning that it will change your views on marijuana. The views, I think, are changing, but do you think it's progressing fast enough? And do you think more books like this are necessary? What's your perspective on, people's, new knowledge of marijuana and its uses in various ways?
It's not changing fast enough for me, but I really do believe the back of the beast has been broken, Canada, I don't know if you guys know down there, but next month, April, the government has promised to table legislation for across-the-board legalization of cannabis for adults. Federal.
Nice.
It doesn't go any bigger than that. And that's going to influence other countries, and we already have, it's changing all over the world, not all over the world, but in many places. The country of Uruguay, the little country of Uruguay down in South America is the first country to, across the board, legalize cannabis for adults. Countries in Europe, a variety of countries are working on it. Mexico has decriminalized it. Portugal is, we're going a little bigger than cannabis here because Portugal, to me, is like a light in the darkness. They have decriminalized all drugs, essentially, as far as I understand. And it's working. See, this is the other thing, the naysayers, the fearful people, the more conservative type people, they'll start seeing evidence. What's happening in Portugal is that policing costs are going down, crime is going down, health benefits are increasing, et cetera, et cetera. Criminal gangs are being eliminated. I mean, our Prime Minister up here, Trudeau, one of his biggest reasons he promised in his campaign that he was going to do this, and he's following through on it, was because to get it out of the hands of criminals, and when you get it out of the hands of criminals, it changes a whole bunch of things. And one of the things that changes is monitoring the way that the plant is grown. This is a big issue too, because a lot of people are using potentially harmful chemicals in the growing and the production of cannabis. And there needs to be a lot more oversight with that. And legalizing it helps because then you can have inspections and different things and so on and so on. So in terms of your question, not fast enough for me. I think it's inevitable, and yes, there needs to be a lot more work done, but it is being done. That's the thing. It's happening.
All right. right. Well, we appreciate you coming on the show. Stephen, do you have a website or anything you want to plug?
Thank you for asking, Jeffrey. Yes, I do, and encourage people also to submit posts for it because I have a blog section in it. The website is cannabisandspirituality.com. And in a similar vein, there's a Facebook group for it, which I hope people will join and similarly submit posts for. I would like this to be an increasingly interactive channel, and the Facebook group is called Cannabis and Spirituality, just, the same as the title of the book. So very easy to remember all that, I think. And thank you for asking about that. Yeah. And the book is available everywhere also. It's available at Amazon, Barnes & Noble. And personally, if I may just say, put a little plug in for small bookstores. Small bookstores are suffering everywhere, and local bookstores. And the more people can support them by buying books from them, the healthier all that will be, and that'll be good for everybody, in my opinion. So if you're interested in this book and you have a local bookstore that might be willing to carry it or even order it for you, I encourage people to go that way.
All right. Well, we appreciate you doing the show. Thanks, man. Have a good weekend.
Thank you. And again, thank you for your interest in this, Jeffrey. And thanks, Joe. Blessings to you all.
All right. Thanks, Jay. Thanks, everybody, for listening. You're listening to United Public Radio 107.7 FM New Orleans. And we'll see you next Friday with Christos Rupolo, Curse of the Man Who Sees UFOs. You don't want to miss that one. It's going to be madness. Coming up next, Supernatural Substation. And, watch out for, if you're elderly, I just want to say, watch out. I'm sorry your Meals for Wheels got taken away from you from the fascist Nazis in the White House. And, they apparently forgot who Christ was. Good night, everybody. Good week. Have a good weekend. Good night.
Good night.
Okay, thanks, gentlemen. Are we done, or did you want to talk about anything else off the record here? Hello?
No, that actually have to crash because I got to work at 5 a.m. this morning, so I got to go right to bed.
They've actually got a show following behind them in like 8 minutes.
Right on. Okay, well, muchas gracias.
Yep, good night. See you later.
Okay, cheers.
Okay.